video, I'm going to be going over the rise of Persia up until the first two Persian invasions, which remember are going to occur in 490 and 480 BC, respectively. So the rise of the Persian Empire is going to occur in the 6th century BC, so the 500s immediately following the year 600. Here you can see, obviously, we have the Median Empire, we have the Chaldean Empire, we have the Egyptian Empire, and the Lydian Empire. Remember that Croesus, that we will talk about, is a Lydian, and the Persians will eventually overtake all of these. The great founder of the Persian Empire, not the ultimate founder, but the founder, is that of Cyrus the Great, who is the conqueror of the Medes, Lydia, Babylonia, great conqueror, and respect of the conquered. He did not care what you worshipped, he did not care about your culture, just pay your taxes on time. And so therefore, for example, the Hebrew people, the Jews, love, obviously, Cyrus because he brought them out of the Babylonian captivity and did not make it to where they were under such, what's the word I'm looking for, authoritative and onerous restriction and or oppression. Nevertheless, when this empire is going to obviously expand out, you have contact with the Greeks that will lead to the ultimate two invasions by the Persians. Ignore the Cambyses, they are not of importance, but Cyrus the Great, Darius the First, or Darius the First, and Xerxes. The first Persian invasion of 490 during his reign, and the second Persian invasion of 480. So it all is going to boil down to a misunderstanding and an expansion of the Persian Empire to encompass the whole of Asia, including all of these various different Greek colonies. Because of the Persians overtaking those Greek colonies and those Greek colonies' resistance and the aid in that resistance by the home Greek parent cities of these colonies will lead inevitably to the war that is the first invasion and ultimately to the famous Battle of Marathon. Sardis, particularly an Athenian colony, is going to play a large outsized role. There will be 3 to 4 embedded items as I go through this to obviously help you along. So, the first is our timeline to war. That is going to be that in 507, Athens appeals to Persia for help against Sparta, but that quickly falls apart due to obviously mistrust between the Persians and the Athenians. About 8 years later, Athens is going to help those coastal colonies against the Persians. Sparta's not going to. Sparta's all about only Sparta. Sparta, Sparta, Sparta. I don't care about beyond my own area, and they are isolationist. Sardis, that we saw a second ago, the city that is over here in Asia Minor, is going to experience a bit of problems as it is going to be burned to their ground by the Greek colonists. Sardis was a satrapy, which is kind of like a governor under the Persian Empire. In 494, 4 years later, those colonists are crushed by Persia. 492 would have been the invasion, led by Mardonius, the son-in-law of Darius the emperor, but was shipwrecked, and in the next year, Darius gives a vassalage test. A vassalage test is obviously going to be that you understand as the person giving the land, or the earth, and water, that you are in a subsidiary or a subjugated position. All of the Athenians, or I should say all of the Greeks did it except for Athens and Sparta. And then finally, because of Athens and Sparta's insolence and resistance, Darius the First is going to invade in order to punish the Athenians. Now, the Battle of Marathon is one of the great events in all of human history in which all of civilization, Western civilization particularly, hangs in the balance. Here you can see it is a location, Marathon, exactly 26.2 miles away from Athens. That is why a marathon to this day, when you run it, is that exact distance. It is how far away from Athens it is. And what you will find is that you have the Athenians on one side and the Persians on the other that are being supported by the Persian fleet. Now, the Athenians are outnumbered, and be clear, it is the Athenians and the Athenians alone who are going to stand against the Persians. Now, what is going to happen is that the battle is not going to commence right away. It's going to be a standoff that is going to last for some amount of time. And the Athenians are going to send a runner by the name of Phidippides to go and gain aid at Sparta. The Spartans say, sure, we will come and stand with you against the Persians. We just have to, obviously, take care of a few religious obligations here, and we'll be on our way. Phidippides is the famed marathonian runner, the first one to run a marathon. But be clear, he ran hundreds of miles from Marathon down to Sparta and then back. His running is not limited to the 26.2. Now, boys and girls, in this standoff, the Athenians are going to benefit from the great benefit that one could always have. That is, they have a military genius, Miltiades. And it is the decision of Miltiades that will lead to the ultimate Greek victory. Miltiades, and that's your first item to put into, hopefully, your quiz. M-I-L-T-I-A-D-E-S. Miltiades is item number 1. Is essentially going to bum rush them and envelop the Persians. The Persians were not fit equipment-wise, armor-wise, to fight against the style that the Greeks had. And so even though they are outnumbered, the Athenians are going to win the day. I cannot stress this enough. The greatest thing that an Athenian can ever say from this day forward, I fought at the Battle of Marathon. It is like somebody saying, I was there on D-Day, when essentially the Allies saved the world from Nazi tyranny. The example of this is the great tragedian and poet Aeschylus. As great as he is as a poet, the thing that he wants to be known for more than anything else is that he, on his tombstone, wanted it to be said that he fought at the Battle of Marathon. This battle in 490 BC truly was a linchpin of history. There is no way that the Athenians should have won, and it was the Athenians alone who stood against the might of the whole of the Persian Empire, and it was the Athenians who had indeed won the day. Even as the Persians were fleeing through the marshes that you see here into their fleet, they were pursued by the Athenians, and those Persians obviously were cut down from behind. It was said that Aeschylus's brother actually tried to prevent one of the Persian boats from pulling away from being docked on the land, had his arms chopped off, and then chomped down onto the boat with his teeth. Aeschylus's brother, supposedly. This was a moment in 490 BC that, for all intents and purposes, saved Western civilization in the course of a singular afternoon. I would rank this as easily one of the 10 to 15 most important moments, battles in all of human history. Had it gone the way that everybody would have predicted it to do so, the Athenians, to say they were underdogs is gross understatement. Then, of course, all that would come to be from the Greek flowering of civilization that influences us still to this day would not have been, obviously, undertaken and would not have come to pass. And so, due to the genius of Miltiades, remember your first item, you have this unthinkable and unexpected victory, as it were. Immediately what is going to happen is that, again, the Athenians are going to benefit, because they are going to discover in the south of Attica, this being Attica, the region of Athens, right down at the bottom, a place called Lauria. And you can see it down here, Laurion. It was discovered trillions, using a modern term, trillions of dollars of silver. And so there were two sides to try and decide, what are we going to do with the silver? One side, led by Aristides the Just, and that lets you know about him. He was morally irreproachable, says, let's just take the money and distribute it amongst the population. Themistocles says, no. We are going to take this silver, this money that we have discovered in these silver mines, and he has a long-term view. So they benefited from having the genius Miltiades, now they benefit from having the genius Themistocles. And what is Themistocles going to claim that we should do with all of this money? Rivalry with Aristides the Just, who wants to give it away just to the people of Athens? Build a fleet. Triremes is a kind of boat so called because it had 3 sets of oars, or oarsmen. And he, in building these triremes, and you can see here an Athenian trireme, is going to build a fleet to make Athens the uncontested supremacy power on the water for the next over 100 years. He knows that Athens, at its very core, is a seafaring city-state, trade, and eventually we will see warfare, and thus the trireme is what is going to be invested in. Meanwhile, you can see the way that it is set up later on in the benefit of these triremes is that Athens, being not on the actual coast, has these set of long walls that protects those that are traveling from Athens down to the port of the Piraeus, Piraeus. That is not the second item, but the Athenian port. And it is then going to allow all those triremes to reign supreme on the sea. Now, Aristides has then been ostracized. When you are ostracized, every year what happens in Athens is that somebody who is seen as gaining too much political power is going to obviously have their name written down on a piece of pottery. Ostraka is what it is called. And whoever has their name written on the most ostraka becomes ostracized, i.e. exiled out of the city for that particular year. Which means that Themistocles' idea is going to win through. Now, by the time that you have 10 years later, in 480 BC, the second Persian invasion will occur. Darius the Great, Darius the First, is dead, and now leading the charge for the punitive campaign. The Persians want to punish the Athenians. They want to teach the Athenians a lesson for what has happened at Marathon 10 years earlier. And so Xerxes will gather together an army of what he calls immortals, an elite set, 1,000,000 people strong according to the historian Herodotus, although we cannot trust Herodotus to be sure, and will invade in two ways. One, the invasion will come by land, in which, let's see if I have a larger map that I can show. It doesn't seem as though I do. Let's see if I can find it really quickly. There it is. He's going to cross the Hellespont. Remember that the Hellespont is this small strip of land that connects or disconnects Europe from Asia. Xerxes is going to cross the Hellespont with an army, march by land down into Greece, as it were, and also use a sailing ship to obviously come in. Your second item, obviously, to put in is Xerxes. Xerxes. So in 480, this is Xerxes' plan. Now, Xerxes is going to be indicated by Herodotus of suffering from hubris. This is a concept of Greek tragedy that you have overweening pride. And this is what Herodotus is going to point out as being the reason as to why the Persian invasion is going to be a failure. And you can see it in an incident as when crossing the Hellespont, the Persians had built a pontoon bridge across it. A storm comes across one night, destroys the bridge. Xerxes, being the great God Emperor of Persia, is going to have men go out into the Hellespont and literally whip the sea as punishment to let them know that even nature itself will not overcome him and his plans. Now, there are three great engagements that you need to be familiar with when it comes to, obviously, the second Persian invasion of 480. The first of which is going to be a naval battle that is going to occur concurrently with a land battle that is here. The naval battle is going to be here off of the Cape of the Euboea. The Euboea is a large island right north of the mainland of Greece, the region of Attica with Athens, the region of Boeotia with Thebes, the region of Phocis. And this battle called Artemisium, that you can see that occurs right here, is a disaster for the Persians because they have to experience the first storm that is here before the battle, and then a second storm that is going to follow after the battle. And so therefore the Athenians and the Greeks, Athenians particularly, are going to obviously benefit from good luck. However, what you can also see is that the Athenians know that there is a problem, that they will not be able to fight off in the way that they had at the Battle of Marathon 10 years previous, this mighty, mighty Persian force. And so therefore, they negotiate with the Spartans that gain them some time. Because what the Athenians have done is they've gone over to Delphi. And at Delphi, the oracle of Apollo at Delphi gives cryptic answers to the questions that you have. And so the Athenians asked, what do we do with the Persian army bearing down on us? And the Delphic oracle said, seek ye houses of wood. And immediately two ideas break out in Athens. Both old codgers say, oh, I know what it means. The House of Wood is the Athenian temple to Athena on the Acropolis as built by Pisistratus. We will go up into that temple and the goddess will protect us. Themistocles, on the other hand, says, yeah, y'all do that. The Houses of Wood is this mighty Athenian fleet that I have built. Let's put the population into that fleet, buy some time, figure out what to do. And that's exactly what they do. Now, to buy them time to be able to do this, they send to the place of Thermopylae. Thermo means hot. Pylae means gates. And so literally it is the hot gates. 300 Spartans. 300 Spartans against 1,000,000 Persians. And the reason why this is the perfect spot is because at Thermopylae, on one side you have the sea, on the other you have these high mountains immediately, and there's a small corridor where a group like 300 is able to obviously fend them off. And so the Battle of Artemisium goes in the favor of the Athenians because of the assistance of the storms, and those Spartan soldiers led by Leonidas the second, one of the two Spartan kings, is going to successfully gain them time. And there you can see Thermopylae, in which you have water on one side, you have the mountains on the other, and they will hold them off for a good amount of time. Now, it is told in Herodotus, the great historian that is telling us about the Persian Wars, that one of the exchanges between the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae and the might of the Persian army is that when the Persians claim that we are going to shoot so many arrows at you that we will blot out the sun, the Spartan says, oh, that's perfectly fine. We prefer to fight in the shade. That's the kind of chutzpah, the kind of just simply intimidating factor that they carried and comported themselves with. So, eventually, however, what will happen is that they will be betrayed by a fellow by the name of Ephialtes, who will tell to them an alternate rate around. They will be surrounded with the 300 and completely wiped out. However, they erected a monument at Thermopylae for the 300 Spartans, and Leonidas II is saying something along the lines, here we stand, commanded to fight unto the death, which of course they did do. Meanwhile, boys and girls, the city of Athens is going to be utterly and completely destroyed by the Persians. And that is why the year 480 BC is the turning point, because the Athens that exists before 480 BC is not the Athens that exists afterwards, because the city is going to have to be completely and utterly rebuilt. Everything is burned, everything is destroyed, all the statues are buried in the ground. Now, we're glad for this, obviously, because when we dig them up, they are rather well preserved. But everything before 480 and this destruction of Athens is known as the Archaic period, archaic art, and everything after 480 is going to be known as, obviously, the Classical period. Well, Themistocles has a plan, as doesn't he always? And that plan surrounds the island of Salamis. The ships of the Persians are, one, lesser in number because they were wrecked by a storm in large portion, and then secondly, they are really big and not maneuverable. Meanwhile, the Athenian ships are incredibly maneuverable, and as such, it would be perfect to try and lure the Persians into a tight spot that you see right here, into the Straits of Salamis, thus rendering them and their lack of maneuverability less effective than the Athenians, and that is exactly what goes on. Those Persians are sucked into the Straits of Salamis, whereupon the allies of the Athenians and the Spartans are able to absolutely wreck them. And at this Battle of Salamis is going to be the second great miracle in 10 years. The miracle of Marathon in 490, and now the miracle of Salamis of 480, in which once again the Athenians, now instead of alone like they were against the Persians in 490, along with their Greek allies, is going to rebuff the Persian advance and the Persian attack, and in that way, like I said, in a miraculous way, survive. So that then what will happen following 480, which is a 75-year period of blossoming civilization unlike the world has ever seen. Your third item, I think there will be four, is Salamis. S-A-L-A-M-I-S. That island and that battle, as it were. Xerxes himself was said to have been watching the battle unfold at some point, perhaps on the land surrounding it, to have jumped from his seat 3 times, seeing his mighty fleet rendered smashed by the more maneuverable Athenian and Greek ships, and he himself, Xerxes, the Emperor of Persia, returns to Persia, leaving behind Mardonius. And then at the Battle of Plataea in the following year, Mardonius suffers the final loss, a land loss, against the Athenians and other Greek allies, including the Spartans. And for all intents and purposes, it's just mop-up duty. The second Persian invasion, the second Persian-Greek war, is officially over in 479. Now, the last thing I will leave you with is that 490 BC, the Battle of Marathon, the Athenians barely survived. They won when they shouldn't have. 480 BC, the second great Persian invasion, the second great Persian war. Again, the Athenians win when they should not have. And so, therefore, the thinking in Athens is that indeed there shall be another Persian invasion, but we need to be ready. And so, therefore, they form an alliance with all of Greece that is going to be known as the Delian League. And it is the Delian League, unfortunately, that will lead to an even more catastrophic war, so called because of the island of Delos, where the treasury was located. And this would be the war that eventually will be fought as a quasi-civil war between Athens and Sparta because of the Delian League, and that's what we'll talk about next time. And that's your fourth and final item, Delos, which is the island where the Delian League was located. D-E-L-O-S. Delos is that island upon which the treasury of the Delian League was held and located. So, sorry I couldn't be here today at Hackadex, but you at least watched the video and earn a free 100 for doing it. So, thanks so much.